Hi, welcome to Noise Violation Podcast. Today's guest is a speaker, author, and happiness coach. He helps individuals and organizations achieve an energizing balance of authentic personal happiness and effortless professional success based on Ivy League science and timeless transcendental wisdom. Please welcome Robert Mack to the show.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me, man.
Yes, Robert, thanks for being here.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
So just to get started, I like to get a background of, our guests. So kind of tell us, how you grew up, where you're from. Your college degree, how'd you get into the author, speaking, and happiness coach? Just give us a timeline of your journey.
Yeah, boy. So I'm not going to tell you when I was born because it wasn't that long ago, okay? But still, I grew up in a beautiful family, a loving family. We had lots of stress like most families do. I was a pretty good athlete. I did pretty well in school, mostly because I had a disciplinarian for a father. So I don't claim to be that smart, but I certainly worked hard. So that all being said, I was also an extremely unhappy kid. I mean, I was so deeply unhappy that I became suicidal, after a period of time. And that suicidal ideation I thought would go away, like as I just did better in school and if I probably had the right girlfriend as I get a little older or whatever, but it never went away. It just got worse. It's so bad. I decided to start doing research on ways essentially to kill myself. And I didn't have access to a lot of ways to kill myself. And a lot of the other ways felt very violent. So I ultimately decided that I would slit my wrist. So went to the kitchen one day, got a knife, and I just rammed it into my wrist. And the whole point of that was partly I didn't want to experience pain, and I was committed, but not like fully committed, obviously. And something real strange happened, man. Like at that moment, something I didn't expect to happen, which was that I felt peace. Like you just felt peace for no reason, and that surprised me. And it also encouraged me to like postpone the suicide thing for a little while. At that time, it was like just an hour. It wasn't long, man. It was just an hour. I wasn't even committed to the whole hour, honestly. But I started doing some research, and I found lots of interesting, quite dramatic and unexpected insights and research and wisdom out there in the world that had been shared by people that were much smarter than me, that knew a lot more than me. And I started applying what I could. And it didn't happen overnight. It was mostly like 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. But day in and day out, I would apply things and I would track them to see what worked and what didn't. And eventually, that journal essentially became the book Happiness from the Inside Out, which is the first book I published. Between that suicidal experience, when I was working for a management consulting firm, I decided to go back to get a business degree. And then I found this program at Penn, which is a master's in applied positive psychology. It's the science of happiness. And I entered that program. I graduated from that program, and I had opened my private practice just slightly before that. And I published my book after that. And so that's kind of what brings me, into the space that I work in now, as a speaker and as a coach and as an author.
Yeah. So to go to the suicide, thank you for being so candid about it and open. Was there a specific thought, or was it a feeling that built up to that point?
Yeah, dude, what a great question, man. Like, honestly, yeah, it was. Like, it was a number of things. First of all, I hated myself. Like, I don't know if you ever hated something or someone before, but as much as I've ever hated anything or anybody in the world, I hated myself 1,000 times worse. I just did. It felt like nothing I did was right. I felt like I was the most unattractive person in the world, quite frankly. I knew I was never going to have a girlfriend. I felt like, no matter how well I thought, I did, or other people thought I did academically or athletically, I always knew that I missed that one answer, or I missed those 5 answers, or I was a minute and a half slow on the cross country trail, or, I could have scored way more points in the basketball court. So it was all of that, plus this idea that, like, it's wild, man. I don't know if you ever sit down and think about it, but like, we're kind of like born one day, you're thrown into a planet, you're thrown into a family, you work really hard to like achieve all this stuff. Most of it, the happiness that you get from that stuff doesn't last. And then even best case scenario, if you get everything you want, one day it's taken away from you. Everybody you love is taken away from you by death. That would drive me nuts, man. And I just thought, I don't want to suffer through that. I want to if we have to leave this planet anyway, I want to leave first before I suffer all these other things, So that was really, it was this existential angst combined with a lot of self-loathing.
Right. And then you said you had peace. Is that finally when you confronted death? Did you have a fear of death?
Yeah, good question, man.
Explain that.
Yeah, so I didn't really have a fear of death, though. I will be honest. I grew up in a Christian household, so I had a fear of like going to hell, and I didn't want that. And then I started looking and browsing or sort of perusing lots of texts and books on other religions and spiritual traditions in terms of what they thought about suicide. And none of them were particularly promising. They weren't particularly encouraging. It wasn't like, you can kill yourself and you're gonna come out and either, if you believe in reincarnation, for instance, are you going to reincarnate into a better life? Probably not. Are you going to go to heaven? I don't know about that. Like, even if you don't believe in any of those things, the best possible solution was like, well, maybe I'll stop existing altogether. But I found even that idea kind of odd. It didn't resonate. So lots of that actually surprisingly prevented me from following through on the suicide. I think it's part of the reason I kind of hesitated or didn't fully commit when I went to dig the knife in. So yeah, it was lots of thoughts in my head that were confusing, but none of them were particularly helpful in terms of knowing which way to turn,
Yeah. And so, I mean, you mentioned that you were a disciplinarian father, or like your father was. And so you had, I'm sure, a lot of this pressure to achieve. And so that it built up and you're hard on yourself. And so what have you done since then to, I feel the same way sometimes. It's like I have all these goals and aspirations, like I need to do this, and look, I want to do that better. And we were just talking about writing a book, and it's hard to put down because you want to keep editing or keep improving upon it. And so it's like, how did you get to that point where you weren't so hard on yourself and you could start loving yourself?
Yeah, dude, what a great question. And yeah, that's a great metaphor. I like the metaphor you used. I knew right away when I talked to you that I was going to love talking to you, man. The process of editing a book was very much the way I felt about my life, which was that it was endless. And no matter how many times I edited something, it was never good enough and I need to go in again. And maybe I need to start from the beginning. Can I just get the restart button or whatever? And so I started, honestly, with not a whole lot of direction. I just looked for everything I could find on video, in books. I'm a big book reader. And a lot of things didn't seem to work very well, but I tried them all, dude. And I would say that what did work so well, particularly around the self-love part, honestly, was just beginning to look for evidence of the ways in which, first of all, I already had love in my life, like focusing on that. And then second of all, looking for things within myself that made me feel proud or happy or confident without much effort. Like, I think the mistake I made in the very beginning was I was trying to convince myself that I liked things about myself that I did not like,
Yeah.
and then, oh, of course I don't love myself. How could I? I'm so ugly, or I'm this, or I'm that. But when I stopped doing that and I said, what's the one or two or three things that I genuinely love about myself? And in the beginning, the list was seriously like, oh, I love that I'm trying to love myself. I love that I'm a hard worker, and I love that I genuinely care about people and I genuinely love other people. And that was like it, man, like for a while. And then I just kept focusing on those three things though. And then what happens is, as you start to feel better, your mind opens up and you start seeing all these other things about yourself that you like, but didn't think you liked. And then before long, the things you hated, you even like those things. You're like, oh, wow, it's pretty interesting that I'm lazy in this way and lazy in that way. I kind of like that about myself, and you start to see it differently. Like, it didn't appear to be laziness anymore. It was just, I was prioritizing what truly mattered over what didn't. You just start to see it in whole new ways. And there's lots of science to support that, that when you feel better, you start to see things differently. But yeah, man, that's kind of where I started, was basically with the self-love journal and building a case for why I can or should or do feel self-love. Yeah.
Right. Wow. And I had a psychologist on one of my earlier episodes, and he said the biggest problem that he sees is people don't love themselves enough. And so that leads to other problems or relationship issues, and just all around that, it spurs just, poison throughout the body and their life.
So poignantly said, man. I love that. And I couldn't agree with you more. That's such a profound remark to make. And it's true. It's like, you get into a relationship with someone, and I know I had this experience, and you don't love yourself and they don't love themselves. So it's the equivalent of you both being broke, like being penniless, like being beggars. And you each get in this relationship and you're trying to make each other better off, but you can't. You're begging from them. They have nothing. They're begging from you. You have nothing. And then you end up arguing about it all the time. Right. And so it's true. We go looking into the world for the love that we essentially and inherently are already. But since we never take time to look into ourselves to find the love that's already there, we have nothing to offer anybody else. And so we end up projecting all of this self-hate and this self-loathing onto the other person, and we blame them for our unhappiness, but it's never the case.
Yeah. When did you have your suicide experience? How
Yeah.
in college or out of college?
It was like right out of college. I started feeling deeply depressed as early as I can remember being alive. So at like 6 or 7, I hated myself, and I was always anxious, always stressed. The anxiety was paralyzing, man. I didn't want to wake up in the mornings. And then I started having the suicidal thoughts, probably like, I don't know, 12 or 13. I just wanted to die. I wish I'd never been born. And then when I got into college, it got worse because I wanted to be a professional basketball player. But that didn't happen, man. I always thought that was going to be my saving grace. I'll be, the next, I wouldn't quite be Michael Jordan, but maybe be P.J. Armstrong or something like that. And it never happened, man. It never happened. So that was like devastating. So that just added insult to injury. I did have an incredible girlfriend at the time, but she was also going through lots of, her own experience of frustration and anxiety and unhappiness. So that didn't help. Directly, it didn't help. Later it did, but yes.
And when you talk about happiness, how do you define that? Is it a scientific? Is it spiritual?
Great question, man. So I used to split hairs. If I put on my positive psychology hat, all my Ivy League alum would be very upset at me for just calling it happiness. They'd say, Rob, that's subjective well-being, and over there is emotion, positive emotion, and I get all of that. But most of us, have an intuitive understanding of what happiness is. The way I would describe happiness is it's peaceful aliveness. It's an experience of peaceful aliveness that is lasting, that is abiding, that is meaningful, that is always behind, beneath, above, below, and beyond every other emotion you experience. And so it's being in touch with that peaceful aliveness that is within you, that truly is you, even if you're having a day that seems tough or that seems sad. There's just something deeper than that you're consistently aware of that lets you know all is well. That truly this thing you're experiencing isn't you. It's just an experience. And deeper, if you dive deeper, there's perfect calm and peace and equanimity beneath the surface of whatever your life is showing up or showing to you, right? So it's sort of like being in the ocean. There's always turmoil on the surface, but if you dive deep enough, it's always peaceful there. It's quiet there. And so that's the experience of happiness. And
would you say happiness is the goal to be happy all of the time, or is it a like a tool in the tool belt? Like, I should be happy, but something happened, so I'm going to be angry right now, or I should just go back to happiness, get rid of the anger immediately and go back to happiness. Where do you classify that?
Great question. So all emotions exist to be felt. Right. And so the one thing you don't want to get into is fighting emotion. You don't want to get into trying to change emotion. Same thing with thoughts, right? That behind every feeling is really a thought, a belief system, a story, a judgment. Okay. And so we don't want to fight or resist or even seek any other state than the one we're in, or any other emotion than the one we're in. But we can become aware of something that undergirds or underscores or is underneath the emotion that you're experiencing at the time. So the first step really is just to notice what you're feeling without adding any additional commentary or judgment or stories about what you're feeling. Like telling yourself, oh, I should love myself, I shouldn't hate myself, or I should be grateful, or this shouldn't be happening. You drop all of that and just feel into what you're feeling without the story. And you do it without judgment. That non-judgmental awareness of what you're feeling already allows you to begin to transcend what you're feeling. Okay, you're already sort of in a state of acceptance there. So you're surrendering to what you feel, but you're not adding to the pain by adding a story or any judgment on top. And as you just experience that, you'll also begin to notice, and this is more advanced level, over time, as the emotion lasts less long or passes more quickly and shows up less frequently, you also begin to notice that if you can observe it, it's not you. So if you're having an emotion or a thought, there's something that you observe that thought and feeling from, right? That awareness itself is what you are. And at some point, you just turn your attention, your focus back on that awareness, and that is peace. And so the way I would describe that in simple terms is to say, it's not about achieving peace. It's not about reaching for it or seeking it. It's about just being more and more aware of the infinite happiness and peace and love that exists within you at all times. You're not trying to get it, not trying to create it. It's just always underneath that. So it's sort of like the sky. There are days when, as you know, it seems cloudy outside or gray or it's raining. And it's so easy to forget that behind those clouds is a blue sky. And if we could remember there's a blue sky behind those clouds, we can let the clouds pass without worry, without concern, without obsessing about them or clinging or attaching. And because we're aware of the sky, we can also be aware of that peace and equanimity inside of us at all times, even if we're having a tough day.
And that blue sky, is that blue sky, is that a memory? Is that a feeling?
Yes, it's a great question. I love your questions, man. You're genuinely interested in stuff. So like, I would call it your true nature. And all it is the awareness of your own existence. Okay, so before you can be aware that a table exists or an emotion exists or your car exists, before you can be aware of any of that, you have to be aware of your own self, right? And so the awareness of your own presence, we can call it simply being present, but the awareness of that peaceful aliveness or that life force, life energy in your fingers and your body, that in and of itself is the sky. Okay? It's just that awareness itself. It's thoughtless, wordless awareness though. It's a silent awareness. If you spend enough time in that awareness, at first it feels boring. It's like, what am I doing? This is like walking into a dark room. There's nothing here. But if you can stay in the dark room, if you can stay focused on just your own presence, the feeling of that peaceful aliveness inside your body more consistently, you'll be surprised because you think it's empty, but it's full. It's like fulfillment itself, but nobody spends enough time with it. We always just say, oh, it's boring. There's nothing in this dark room. I'm gonna go back out into the light, even though out in the light is where all the problems are, right? So that's part of the challenge of the opportunity, is to be that blue sky. You already are that, but to do it consciously and knowingly.
And can this be done like, the first thing my mind goes to is meditation, because you're saying sit there with it and be there with it. Can this be achieved like when you're walking around? Can you?
Yes, dude. Oh, so good, man. So good. You are an expert in this. So yes. So I don't know about you. The first meditation class I had, brother, it was tough, man. I thought I was going to suffocate. I thought I was going to have a panic attack. I was surrounded by 30 of the most beautiful women somehow ever, and they all seem to be experts in meditation, right? It's just and so I remember thinking, I can never do this again. And so later I said, well, I'm going to try it at home. Maybe there's too much pressure, too much energy around me, whatever. And then I discovered that, well, an hour was too long for me. I was not very good. And then I realized 30 minutes was too long, and 10 minutes was too long, and even 5 minutes was too long. And over the process, I discovered that, I don't know, I can do one breath though. Like everybody can do one breath. Mm-hmm. So I started to practice and play with this idea of micro meditations. A micro meditation is just one breath or one moment where you get in touch with, in the very beginning stages, just that breath. And the whole point is to experience and enjoy the breath, not think about it. And you can do that while you're doing any and every other activity in your life, walking, eating, showering, cleaning, whatever it is that you're doing. Just see if you can occasionally, while you continue doing what you're doing, take one breath, with the only goal being to enjoy that breath and not let thoughts get in the way, right? So it is a moment of meditation. Sometimes we call it mindfulness, but it's not being full of mind, it's being full of thoughtless awareness.
Yeah, and so to reach the level of happiness, did you have to hit rock bottom? Is it the contrast that people need to say, hey, this really sucks down here, but now this is great? So it's the contrast that people really pick up on.
Yeah, it's a great point, man. Like, So one of my favorite authors in the beginning, that person, was working in a consulting company. There was a partner one day who started talking to me for no good reason. I was an analyst. I was sure was fired. That never happens. They're too senior to talk to someone like me that was doing the grunt work, but he did. He took an interest, and he recommended an Abraham Hicks book. And it changed my life forever when I started reading Abraham Hicks. And they talk very eloquently about the benefit and value of contrast and the contrast effect. And so definitely, without question, hitting rock bottom forced me, encouraged me to finally look up, because once you hit bottom, there's nowhere else to look. You can't look down. You're at the very, it feels like you're at the very bottom. So you begin to look up, and that began to change my life when I began to do that. It is the contrast, though. What suicide provided for me, okay, and what depression provided for me, was a commitment to live blissfully or not at all. It literally became life and death. And the one thing I say always that a lot of people have a hard time understanding, you won't, but like when something's life or death, you get really good really fast because you feel like your survival depends on it, man. The only thing I can do, I can talk to you about happiness. I can't tie my shoes. I can't cook a great meal. None of these things, man, because I've become so obsessed with the happiness thing because it literally felt life or death. And so you're absolutely right about that. The contrast effect, we can call it duality, which is the world, definitely is like the greatest teacher and trainer for pushing you, forcing you to go inside to find what you can't find in the world.
Right. And I feel like a lot of people play in that middle, and you're talking about life or death, and a lot of people don't want to confront either. And so they stay right there in the middle where they don't really break free. And so they don't experience great sadness because they don't want to feel it, or they don't experience great happiness because they probably can't feel the great sadness, whether that's through medication or their own thoughts or stories.
Dude, crushing it, dude. That's exactly right about that. You're right about that. Like, it's interesting. The life and reality is so much sweeter than our fantasies about it, and likewise, and what I mean by that is so many things I've feared in my life. I don't know about you, but I feared, like, at some point I was like, if I lose my job, even though I hated my job, I was like, if I lose my job and I don't have any money coming in, I have to get rid of these 2 beautiful German cars, and I have to get rid of my apartment, and I'm not going to have a date, all these things, right? I thought, man, it's going to be the end of me. You know what I mean? Like, I was really freaked out, and I was like, nobody's going to love me. And then it happened, essentially, right? And it was the best thing ever. Like, I didn't have to go to work, man. And yeah, I didn't have any money, but I was still eating something. So it's interesting. The mind is so beautiful as a problem-solving instrument, but it is also a troublemaker. And your fear of not diving into the emotion that you're already experiencing, your fear of diving deeper, is literally the only thing preventing the experience that it's hollow, that it's empty, that it's a monster under the bed. That the emotion itself, it seems so scary, but when you really dive into it, there's nothing there. You just dive right through, and you have a couple experiences like that, and suddenly you realize that you don't need to run from your emotions, that if you embrace them, you'll discover they're empty.
Right. And I always hear the quote, it might have been Tony Robbins or somebody that says, like, good is the enemy of the great. And so it's like people are fine with the good because all their needs are met. They have the house, they have the food, they have a relationship. But how do people break into that great that we're talking about, where they're actually feeling and being inspired and have meaning?
Yeah, I love that. So I would say that you nailed it, by the way. Most of us live to like 70, 80, but we die at 30, right? I mean, probably even younger, like on the inside, we die. So the good to great thing is just so beautiful. I mean, that was part of it wasn't, I shouldn't say a secret, it's an open secret, but when I realized that I was going to live blissfully or not at all, I had essentially, without quite knowing it, that I was only reaching for a great life, the greatest possible life. That doesn't mean the life with the most amount of money or the most success, because I am clear those things don't provide it. I'll take it, I'll receive it as long as I can maintain the happiness level at this thing, right? So I would say that number one is just setting an intention for it and really meaning it. That's number one. Is if you just mean it, when you say you want to be happy no matter what, and you want to be as happy as humanly possible, that'll take you all the way home. You could take any path essentially, and you're going to continue to push through, and you're going to eventually find your way home, right? The second thing is really educating yourself on what it means to live the greatest, best, happiest, most peaceful, most loving life. right? And there are lots of really brilliant people out in the world who have done nothing but dedicate their entire lives, personal and professional lives, to discovering or answering that question for you. So you don't need to spend 10 years doing it the hard way and trying to recreate the wheel. Just go study those people, go read their books, go take in that information and then apply it. And so those are the top two things. The third thing is realizing and recognizing that if you think you'll find happiness in the world, in the future, or in the head, you're wrong. So I can tell you 3 places where it does not exist. Like there is no peace of mind, there's only peace of no mind. You know, happiness is not a state of mind, it's a state of being. And essentially at the end of the day, yes, thoughts will lead up to a certain experience, but it will never give you the experience itself. It will lead you right to the brink, right to the edge of the river, but that car cannot take you across the river. You need to swap that car out for a new vehicle, for a boat to get to the other side of the river. Thought and the analytical mind will take you right to the brink of happiness, but it will not let you dive in to the river. It will not let you cross the river. For that, you need thoughtlessness, you need wordlessness, you need silence. That's the experience of meditation. To a large extent, great therapists, what they're doing when they're sitting with you and why it's often so healing and transformative is they're occupying that space for you. We call it unconditional guard or unconditional love, but it's a place of non-judgment. And they're offering that space to you. And then oftentimes we think it's the conversation that led us to feeling the way we do. It's partly true, but it's mostly that their peace and their love was contagious.
Yeah. So could that also be related to the zone? You talk about sports. Man. You're talking about when somebody's in the zone, they're thoughtless. You know, their body's just reacting. They're not really thinking about it.
Yeah, dude, you know how long it took me to make that correlation, bro? Like, that's great, dude. That's a great point. So yes, it is. So psychological state of flow, as some of us might know, there's a guy named Mack. He amazing professor, researcher out of Claremont Graduate University. He studies psychological state of flow, being in the zone. It's what happens when a Michael Jordan scores 60 points, like, you know, he's eating M&Ms or something, you know, and we've all had experience in our lives. There are these moments when there's a loss of self-consciousness, a loss of time consciousness, and you're so absorbed and so consumed and so passionate and purpose-driven around what you're doing that you don't spend a whole lot of time evaluating how you're doing. It kind of happens automatically, very organically, spontaneously. And so that flow-like state, when you're in that state, you are 500 to 1,000% more effective, efficient, efficacious at everything or whatever it is you're doing in that state. Not just that, but you're also enjoying yourself a heck of a lot more than when you're not in that state. So 500 to 1,000%, that means in one day being in the flow state, you can accomplish what would normally take you a year and a half or longer, right? Take you 3 years. So that's just that one brilliant idea that the entrepreneur has, and they put in motion the one great idea that makes that person a best-selling author or whatever. And so you nailed it. At the end of the day, what we're really talking about is flow state in the zone. And we're talking about doing it intentionally and willfully, even when you're doing something that doesn't feel very flow state-like. For instance, swiffering or eating. You know, it's like, who talks about flow state when you're eating? But the truth is, you can be in flow state or something akin to flow state just by putting into practice a few simple principles.
Yeah, that's crazy. I think you're in the flow while you're folding laundry or something.
Yeah, totally. And there's a great expression in Zen, you probably will know it. It's only painful to do the dishes when you're not doing the dishes, right? So it's like only painful to do anything when your mind is somewhere else, right? So if you're conscious or you're not present and or you're doing the dishes and you're thinking about all the other dishes you have to do for the rest of your life, suddenly it's very painful to do the dishes. But when you're not doing that, when you're just in the experience, the tactile, physical, sort of kinesthetic experience of washing the dishes with the water running over your hands, you're not thinking, you're just feeling. It's amazing. It's quite pleasant, right? I mean, it's quite pleasant. I'd rather do that than a whole lot of other things in my life. And the aliveness that we feel in that moment, we often attribute to the water just being the right temperature that day or whatever. And that could be partly true, but on a larger scale, it's just the fact that you were finally truly present. You were presence itself.
Right. And I hear it. It's not the dishes, it's the mind that's, causing the problem. Or I also hear a condition where you're like, you're wanting something to be over. So you're rushing through it instead of, like savoring the moment and enjoying the experience, no matter how minuscule. It's like, once you can apply it to something you don't like, then it's easier to spread across stuff that you do like.
You just nailed it, dude. And that's why it's always good to practice when and where it's easy. That's why encouraging people to practice when they're caught up in the most frustrating moment of their life is not the best recommendation, right? Like the better recommendation is to say, sit there when you've got nothing else going on and just sit in a corner and breathe, or just lay in the bed and don't make it a formal meditation. Don't try to be spiritual. Don't try to be good at it. Just lay there and see if you can actually enjoy the comforter or enjoy that moment like it's the last moment you'll ever experience in your life. Just be in the moment, really deeply in the moment. So you're absolutely right about that. And it is true. You're right that, life is a race. If it's a rat race, then death is the finish line. So why race, right? Like, there's no reason to rush your way through it.
I know. I still have to catch myself, but can you talk about expectations? Like when you have these huge expectations and things don't go your way, then it's like I get let down. It's like, oh, well, this is going to be the one thing that I get all the attention, or I'm going to get famous off this, or, it's like you build all of these things up in your mind, and then reality hits, and then it's.
Totally. So sometimes I think of it as the root of all unhappiness, really, or suffering, of all misery, is believing that happiness and peace or love is out there somewhere other than in here, right? And in the future, other than right here in the present moment. And the truth is that the future never offers you a greater opportunity to be happy than the present does. Okay, the only opportunity you ever have to be or feel or enjoy or experience anything is the present moment, period. When the future shows up, it shows up as the present moment again, right? And so it's all about convincing yourself. You can do it through experience. So you don't need to have blind faith. You can have experiential or existential faith, where you experience more and more the beauty and the bliss of being in the moment. You're fully in the moment. And when you're fully in the moment, you're not projecting into the future this idea of happiness, this state that you hope to one day achieve or acquire. I love positive expectations for people and things. They're much better than negative expectations for people and things. But the truth is, at the end of the day, my happiness is my job. Your happiness is your job. If I've got expectations for you, or for my career, or for my wife, or whatever, those are my expectations. And when I become disappointed, it's my disappointment. Disappointed myself. And as much as they may have said, hey, I'll do that for you, or I'll be there for you, or whatever, the truth is they're saying that from their present state, and things change. They may feel differently at some point, or some things go, who predicted a plague, who predicted, all of the things that are happening today. So yes, if you have to have expectations, make sure they're positive ones. Okay. But if you're attaching your happiness to anything happening, you're setting yourself up for unhappiness. That is a recipe for unhappiness. So happiness is not a happening, right? It's not a happening. Don't attach it to or hitch it to something happening or not happening. Remember, at the end of the day, happiness is something that is truly, purely, and only up to you.
Is there a root word in happiness, or what happiness comes from? Or
that's such a great question. I have to look into that now. All this time, I haven't dug into that question. I do sometimes think of happiness in the same way that I do, I guess, meditation. So like, these are all synonyms for me. So love is a synonym for happiness. And so is meditation. So is God. So is source. It's like all these things to me essentially the same thing. And the difficulty in explaining them is that the explanation never quite gives you the experience, right? And sometimes it gets in the way of the experience. And so, in order to know honey, you have to taste honey. We can explain it all day, right? In order to know, there's no, the word honey won't satisfy your hunger, right? Kind of thing. But I don't know what the root of happiness is. It's a great question. I'll have to check it out now that you mentioned it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'll be looking on your Twitter or something.
Yeah, all right. Yeah. I have to send you a private message just to make sure that you get to it first.
Yeah. And so we've been talking a lot about ourselves and our own happiness, but what about the people around us? Like, I guess there's kind of two questions here. Like, if I'm feeling happy and everyone around me is not happy, then it's almost like I'm guilty for being happy when everyone else is mad. It's like I shouldn't be happy when there's something going on that other people aren't happy. I guess,
Mm,
how do you,
I love this.
what's that?
Dude, what a great question, man. You ask really great questions, brother. I mean that. Um, so I spent the first part of my life doing that. I was like, I can't be happy unless my mom's happy and my dad's happy. And what
Hmm.
happens is nobody becomes happy. If they're
Yeah.
doing the same thing on some level, right? Everybody's doing the same thing on some level. So we need people that are iconoclastic in that way, and revolutionaries in that way, and rebels in that way, that and also are science-based, right? There's an entire empirical body of research around the ways in which happiness and relationships are correlated, right? So we know, for instance, that the happier you get, the happier everyone around you feels, right? We call that emotional contagion, right? Emotion is contagious, it's infectious. It's the most contagious, infectious element on the planet. It's more contagious or infectious than any disease or any virus that's ever been discovered is, because you can transmit it through text. I can transmit it right now through you, through the laptop, right? I mean, literally, I don't even have to say anything. I could just sit here, and I bet you within 30 seconds, you would know how I was feeling, right? So, and you would begin to feel the same way. We got these mirror neurons on our head that let us do that. And so happiness, interestingly enough, leads people to be more generous and more charitable, and they donate more blood and money and time to causes that are good, right? And so we know that happiness increases altruism, but also altruism and donating things, being charitable and being generous and kind also increases your happiness, right? And so there's this positive feedback loop. That being said, one of the things I've discovered in my life was, in the beginning, I was mostly trying to do good things to generally help other people. But I didn't realize so much of it was also so I could be happier. You know, I wanted to feel better as a result of that. Nothing wrong with that. It doesn't work very well though, because what happens is when you give from this place of being or feeling empty or unfulfilled, or just partly complete and wholly, quote unquote, you give with strings attached, with an expectation of reciprocity. And when people don't respond with enough love or gratitude or appreciation, or they don't pay you back the money you lent them or whatever, then your love suddenly becomes hate or frustration or, you know,
Hmm.
disgust. And so that for me is not real love. Real true love and true happiness is unconditional, and it's without expectations of reciprocity. It's giving for the joy of giving, right? It's being charitable or for the joy of being charitable. And so, yeah, if you want to make the world happier, if you want the world to be happier, if you want to live in a happier world, you're the person who's closest to the world. And so you being happy or me being happy is the greatest gift we could ever give the world by far, right?
Hmm.
Don't wait for everybody else to get happy. Don't wait for anybody else to get happy, because you will wait your entire life. I promise. I tried, man. I wasted decades like that. Like, I'll just wait until my girlfriend's happier. It's like, oh, that's not happening. It's 10 years or whatever, you know? So don't wait, right? Don't postpone. Don't procrastinate on this happiness thing.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. And so a lot of what we've been talking about is more mental and psychological. What about the body and the physical? Is what you eat related to your happiness as well?
Yeah, for sure, right? So we know, if you take too many stimulants, if you're doing a lot of drugs and drinking a lot of alcohol, all that's going to have an effect on your psychological and emotional well-being, no question about it. And you want to do what you can to allow an organic unfolding of the happiness within you, and instead of trying to consume your happiness. Now, that being said, lots of, any of the superfoods and generally having a well-balanced diet, will allow you to access the happiness that's within you much more easily, much more efficaciously, right? And so, yes, definitely want to look out for your diet. Most of it's just eating a well-balanced diet. You can notice whether something's good or not for you just by noticing how you feel as you're eating it and then after you eat it. I mean, if you just stay out of your head about it and you're fully, deeply focused on enjoying the meal, you'll notice, you have a glass of wine, maybe you're okay. 2 glasses in, 3 glasses in, you start to feel on the inside, you think you're feeling okay in your head. If you are only in the story in your head, you're like, this is a great time. But if you notice the way your body's feeling, you'd be surprised. Your body will tell you if you've gone too far or whatnot. So the other thing is exercise. So I don't want to belabor this point too much. I think most of us are aware of the benefits of exercise, but 30 minutes of exercise, moderate exercise a day is the equivalent psychologically and emotionally to taking the antidepressant or an anti-anxiety pill, right? So that powerful without any of the side effects. You don't have to go
Wow.
crazy, just going for a walk or whatever, And so even 10 minutes they found is, extraordinarily beneficial and noticeable when it comes to improvements in our subjective well-being. So by all means, get some exercise, try to eat a well-balanced diet, and also get sleep, because sleep is important. You want at least 7 to 8 hours.
Yeah, that sounds so easy, but yet we forget so many times. And I even hear about, I read something about power poses where
Amy
you,
Cuddy.
yeah, you stand with your arms on your hips,
Yeah.
like Wonder Woman, or you just fake a smile, and it actually tricks the brain. And what's happening when that's going on? Is the brain releasing like dopamine, or is
Yes.
something?
Yeah. So what's happening there is, it's a great point. I love that. So Amy Cuddy's work, really fascinating. There was some, I think, confusion around like the mediating variables. So a long time they said, oh, is it actually creating a boost in testosterone or boosting oxytocin or whatever? What's the mediating variable? Doesn't matter. The point is, does it work or not? And yes, it does. So, they had people put pencils in their mouths, and it forces you to do this smile thing, and it actually sends signals to your brain that you're happy, and that you release more, neurotransmitters that facilitate your feeling good, right? And so absolutely there. What happens mostly is that, we've got feel good, basically chemicals and hormones in our brain, and we can do things to increase the release or to prevent them from being blocked, right? And so something like that is very helpful. Sitting with your hands on your hips before a presentation or something like that makes you feel more confident. And so sometimes faking it can be very helpful. Like if you're faking a confident pose makes you feel more confident. Sometimes telling yourself, or giving yourself a pep talk, even though you don't believe it right away, can be very helpful. Putting the pencil in your mouth can be very helpful. So that's kind of an inside out approach, which I would recommend at the beginning. Use everything. We don't discriminate when it comes to being happy. We want to use whatever tools are at our disposal. Use the outside in approaches, but also remember ultimately that there are some inside out approaches ultimately that are going to be most helpful as well. But it's like anything else. If something can work as training wheels until you get that bicycle going and you start to get your balance, do it.
Yeah, and you're a happiness coach, and you've worked with a lot of famous people and influential people in business and celebrities. When you work with somebody, what's the do you have a script that you follow? What's kind of the first thing that you look at and consult with people?
Yeah, good question. I just yell at them a lot, man. No, I don't do that. I'm not very good at doing that. So if you want someone to yell at me, I'm not the right guy. But so in the beginning of my practice 20 years ago, I had like an agenda and a schedule and a very structured coaching experience. But I noticed that that wasn't the truth of what worked for me at the end of the day. And so I don't do that as much. One of the things I do, if people are interested, I offer this like Ivy League developed positive psychology assessment. So they can go to like authentichappiness.org, and anybody can do that now. You don't need me. Go to authentichappiness.org and for free, create a profile. And there's an entire battery of assessments that let you, and take tests basically that let you know what your relationship style is, what's your optimism level, what's your gratitude level, and all things like that. Very helpful. And so sometimes I do that. I found that most of the people I talk to don't want more homework, and they don't want to take more assessments. They know they're unhappy, or they know they're struggling with anxiety or whatever. So I just have a conversation, man. And my number one priority in those conversations is to be what they're having trouble being, right? So the first thing is just to simply be unconditional love, and to be genuinely at peace, and to be genuinely interested. Okay. And that's the most important part of any relationship. It's most important, whether it's personal or professional. And then from there, we talk about things while I ask them questions, and I ask a lot of questions, try not to give a whole lot of advice. I ask a lot of questions. And what I'm listening for is, yes, I'm listening to their words, but I'm much more deeply listening to their presence, their energy, and all the nonverbal communication that they're giving me, because that's going to tell the truth of what they really think and believe. And I don't always call them out on that. I don't say, hey, you just told me you're great, but all your body language is telling me something different. I don't do any of that. I just continue to hold that. And over time, we begin to develop a sort of organic plan where we've got homework assignments. I'll send them notes after the session. There are lots of homework assignments if that's something they're interested in. I try to cater those homework assignments based on their primary representational system, or what way they sort of learn the best. So if you're a reader, I'll send you books or articles. If you're a listener and you're auditory, I'll send you audio. If you're visual, I might send you videos. But yeah, that's pretty much the way it works. Every client is a customized experience. And I don't try to force my answers on people. because I'm clear that ultimately everybody knows what's best for themselves, but I will help to educate, sort of tease that out. So that.
And you've worked with like a lot of, successful people. You're working with celebrities and business people who have had a lot of achievements. And so I'm sure they know that they've had achievements and they should be happy. And it's like, how do you, I guess it's like, they know they should be happy, but they're still not happy.
Dude, let me tell you, that's like one of the greatest challenges, man. Like, this is something clearly that, you've had experience with and an understanding around, and that was my experience. I don't know about you. I think we've all had that experience a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe just a moment of success or something you achieved and you're like, man, it's already over. Like, it's like yesterday's news already. It took me 10 years to do that, or 5 years or whatever, or maybe a book takes you a whole 2 years, So I remember having an experience in my life where I was like, man, I should be happy because I've got a great job. I had a great girlfriend. I had great cars. I had a good life, man. I was healthy. I had a family that loved me. Like, why am I not? That made the unhappiness worse. I couldn't feel grateful, no matter how hard I tried, for these things I should feel grateful for. And so, yeah, a lot of the clients that I have, definitely, there's an additional level or layer of guilt, sometimes even shame, around the fact that they're not happy despite having the whole world at their disposal, at their fingertips, right? And so, of course, that's really just more of the same essential problem, which is a mind that can't shut up and sit still, right? It's just a mind. The mind, that's what the mind does well. It just, it thinks and it analyzes.
Do you think they are looking too much externally on, what society or other people think they should be doing, instead of like looking into themselves at what would make them happy?
Great question. Yeah, for sure. I mean, and that's part of the trap and the seductiveness of being famous or being a public figure, is that you get seduced. Part of what drives you and makes you successful is an interest and a motivation around impressing people or entertaining people or teaching people, whatever it is. That's part of what drives you. So you get to that space and place, you find out it doesn't really make you happy. It feels kind of empty or meaningless in lots of ways, or fleeting. And then you get this additional guilt on top of it, right? And then it forces you to look more in the direction of what hasn't already worked for you at all. And you think that increasing the speed will somehow improve or fix the fact that you're going the wrong direction. It's like, more speed will not fix this problem that is essentially one of the wrong direction, right? And so, yes, and so much of their lives consist of trying to find ways to please everybody in their lives. So they might have, an Instagram account, they've got 100 and some million followers, but they've got that one person, or those 100 people, which in the scheme of things is nothing, that hate this person, or they think that they hate this person. They act like they hate this person. They leave negative comments. And then that celebrity or public figure becomes obsessed with these people who themselves are deeply unhappy. They're just looking for the same thing that the celebrity is or the public figure is. And they're just projecting it on each other, right? And so, yeah, that's part of the challenge.
Yeah, it's crazy. And, it's just like they're people too. They experience all the same emotions and doubts that everyone else feels. And so,
like the Us Weekly thing, they're just celebrities. They're just like us. It's true though. It's true. And that's why, one of the greatest things I think I learned early in my life is, people are people, man. Like, and if you could just connect with people on a real level, it's surprising what that alone will do. Just connect with them in a place of, genuine curiosity, real love, or at least appreciation, and not trying to fix a whole lot. You don't need to do that. The fixing happens often on its own. But you're absolutely right about that. And I think so many public figures, celebrities, people in the public spotlight, they kind of crave being anonymous again.
Yeah, and I just want to echo that, connecting with people, it seems like now with everything that's going on, there's two different sides. And if you don't see it my way, then you're evil. Or if you're not on my team, then, you're on the other team. And there is none of that common ground. And so,
dude, I'll see you, man. I'm giving you a big hug, man, because that's a great comment right there. And it's, confirmation bias, right? So there's an entire body of research around confirmation bias and around essentially self-fulfilling prophecies as well, and behavioral confirmation. What does all that mean? It means that like they've done studies, they've taken people who are pro-life and pro-choice in terms of abortion, right? And they've given them an objective piece of data and said, hey guys, here's this objective piece of data, sit down at the table here and let's talk this out and let's find some common ground here. And what happens is everybody tends to double down on their original beliefs, so they become more polarized. You know, so what's happening is you're seeing this playing out. This is writ large in terms of the country itself, but also globally. You're seeing increasing polarization in that way. That's because we have people that are increasingly mind identified. They're identified with their beliefs and their opinions, and they seek their identity. They seek themselves through those identities. It's a very sort of human thing to do. But there's an alternative, a healthy, happy alternative, where instead of doing that, instead of letting this negativity bias rule or this egoic approach to life and conversations rule, we can take a much deeper dive and ask ourselves, what do we really want out of our experience of life? Like, let's think about that for a second. Life is very short, man. It could be over like that. And for most of us, it will be. One day it'll always come, you know, death seems to come before most of us are ready for it or want it to come. And what that means is that time here is very precious, right? It's essentially priceless. Time is even more valuable than money. You can't save time. You can't save happiness and invest it and earn compound interest off of it and then, you know, make more of it later. Time lost, happiness lost today is lost forever. It's gone forever. You can never recoup it. And so the challenge and the opportunity is to come to a recognition and realization that everything and everybody you love, that you care for, that you've worked so hard for, will one day be taken away from you. Knowing that, what do you want to make your life about and for? And if you're clear about it, you know the only reason you want to achieve, acquire, accomplish anything is to be happy. You're after a feeling. You can have that feeling right here, right now, and you can have it in a much lazier, smarter way if we could just find common ground with each other. You know, you can just have that conversation and both agree, yeah, I want to be happy too. Oh, you want to be happy? Let's see what we can do about that. You know, so we don't have to work so hard at it. You know, so that question and that comment right there, brother.
Mm-hmm. And I do think that is what everyone wants. Everyone does want to be happy. Everyone does want to live peacefully. Everyone does love each other. And I think that, you know, unfortunately, the negative gets amplified a lot more than the positive. And so there's a lot of forces and people trying to just make you angry. And so,
that's right, dude. Well, that's just it, isn't it? I mean, think about it. I have to, sometimes that easy exercise or thought experiment for me is to say, man, these people are being awful mean. And I got to think about times in my life when I've been mean, you know, when I've been angry or I tried to incite somebody to get all upset. And what was that about? I was like, well, because I was unhappy. I was miserable, man. Like usually it was like, I was unhappy about something. I felt out of control. I was trying to get my power and control back by projecting all of my anger and hate and frustration and ultimately, or essentially unhappiness on this other person. But that never works. It never works. It just adds fuel to the fire. You know?
Yeah. The bait's always there to hook you into.
Yeah, exactly. Beautiful metaphor. That's exactly right, man. There's always a hook inside that worm. So go ahead and bite if you want to get caught, but I'd rather not get caught.
And to finish up here, I like to end positively. So what's one thing that makes you happy right now?
This conversation, man, and just connecting with you. And I mean that. Like, I appreciate the work you're doing. I appreciate you allowing me to participate in the conversation with you. I appreciate you bringing your authentic, positive energy into my life, sharing it with me, man. So honestly, it's that one thing that I feel most grateful about right now.
All right. Thank you, Robert. And I want to acknowledge you for everything that you're doing, you know, with so much hate and violence and negativity. You're out there on the front lines, pushing positivity and happiness and love and God and spirituality and whatever anyone wants to call it. You're showing people a better way to live. And so I commend you for that and wish you the best on your journey. And just thank you for being on the show.
Dude, my pleasure. It takes light to recognize light, brother. Keep spreading that light. Stay lit, man. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Where can people find you online?
Yeah. So you can find my website at coachrobmack.com. You can find me on all social media platforms, mostly Instagram. I'm not so great with the other ones, but I'm on there at Rob Mack, M-A-C-K official. And you can find my first book, Happiness from the Inside Out, everywhere great books are sold, including Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate you, man. Have a great day.
Yeah, you too.